After a 2-11 start and the Philadelphia 76ers already dealing with a closed-door team meeting, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room right here that Nick Nurse has not been good enough. I know he has been dealt just about the worst hand possible as a head coach, but there is no reason for this team to be as bad as they have been on the floor, and I think it's time we start talking about it a little bit more. There's obviously a ton of reasons for blame for this poor start to the season. I think top to bottom, it has been organizational malpractice for how bad things have been handled and how bad things have looked. But I also think there's zero reason, with the caliber of talent that is still on this roster, and looking around the rest of the league at some of the losses that have gone down, that it is unfair not to assign some sort of blame to Nick Nurse. So, Ryan, immediately, what are your thoughts on my take there?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that you could side in Nick Nurse's favor for is the entire roster hasn't been together yet.
Sure.
Hopefully tomorrow night against the Grizzlies is the first circumstance that we see of that. But at the same time, coaches are supposed to be able to make up for these things.
Yep.
Players getting hurt, finding easy ways to score. And I mean, even last night going out against I know it's the Heat and they're historically a good defensive franchise, but scoring 89 points, like in today's NBA and the statistics that we'll talk about, I'm sure soon, it's been an embarrassing start on both ends. And it's been easy. It'll be easy to point fingers and say the entire roster hasn't been there yet. Joel Embiid and his lackluster effort and performance thus far. But coaches are supposed to be able to help overcome some of these issues, and he hasn't been able to do that for one of the guys that's, I think, most likely, most conversations thrown into that top five kind of coaches category around the league.
Yeah, I've been incredibly underwhelmed by the Nick Nurse experience here in Philadelphia. I do think that like there's strides forward. He is better than Doc Rivers. I will still put that out there. I'm not going to do the full Spider-Man meme as I show on the
Not in the
screen.
record book right now,
Yeah,
though.
but not in the record book right now. Now, there's a couple points I want to hit on here. For starters, you did mention the stats, and to kind of highlight just how bad this team has been and put it into perspective, we're talking about them ranking dead last in points per game, 29th in three-point percentage, 29th in rebounding, dead last in field goal percentage, 29th in true shooting percentage, dead last in effective field goal percentage, and dead last in assists per game. So just about every measurable or important measurable category of offensive production is just in the toilet for this team. Now, what particularly riled me up about this, we've gone down in two different angles as far as the team meeting that has occurred behind the scenes. While plenty of people have run with Tyrese Maxey calling out Joel Embiid, and I do agree that is probably the most notable takeaway here, there's something that has not gotten enough attention, and that is this paragraph right here that says, players told 76ers coach Nick Nurse they want to be coached harder, and coaches in turn said they want players to practice with purpose and attention to detail. Embiid accepted the message sent in the meeting, sources said, but he stated that he sometimes is confused about what the 76ers are attempting to create on the court. That is unacceptable stuff there. Anytime there are professional athletes asking to be coached harder, there is a problem here. Now, I will say from the Sixers end of things, from the PR people that I've talked to, there has been a night and day cultural difference for what Nick Nurse has brought compared to Doc Rivers. But what I mean by that is how often they practice, when they're around. That does not necessarily seem to be equating to what they're doing at practice. I've heard a lot of complaints about how often it happens, very little on how actually hard the practices are. And you can have our debates. I've had this fight in a couple different directions for how important coaching is. But when searching for where to point fingers here, I think Nick Nurse deserves a little bit more blame coming his way, because for me, that just straight up can never happen that players are begging to be coached harder.
I think that's a little bit of like BS. Like you're professional NBA players, like you really need the
Sure.
motivating factor from the coach to be able to go out there and play harder. Like that's where I'm a little bit of like, really, is that a legit leak? Like where's that kind of coming from? I mean, I can definitely see like your side and what you're saying, but come on, guys, like you really need to be pushed.
Fair.
Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, Embiid, you need to be pushed by another grown man to go out there and perform and do your job, which we've seen you do for years at some of the highest levels in the entire league. Like, is that really how far we've fallen right now? And I think the more defining factor of that paragraph was the players practicing with more purpose, or the attention to detail part. I
Yeah.
think the attention to detail part sims right back to the Embiid kind of point of not showing up on time and really maybe not giving an F at this stage of his career, at this stage of the season at least. I think that is the more concerning part than the getting coached hard, because if you're simply just not showing up and doing your job, that creates bad team chemistry. Guys are going to not look at you the same way. And when push comes to shove in these late games and in the playoffs, are they really going to give you everything that they have? It's a cliche, but are they going to give you everything they have if you're really not willing to do the same for them? And for be 13 games into the season and have to have a closed door
Unreal.
team meeting, that's just dumpster fire written all over it.
Yeah, and now for clarity here, we did get this report from Sam Amick saying there are, quote, no internal discussions within the Sixers organization about the job status of Nick Nurse or Daryl Morey, despite the 2-11 start. Quote, the 76ers are off to a worse start than anyone in the organization could have imagined, but there are no internal discussions at this point regarding the job status of Coach Nick Nurse or President of Basketball Operations, multiple league sources told The Athletic. So I'm not saying he should be fired. You've kind of made your bed. You got to sleep in it at this point. But what I am saying is I've been incredibly underwhelmed. And to take it a step forward, I think he was responsible for this entire leak here. That I hate when these matters get out. I understand it is the current ecosystem that we live in, and that is modern media. That they're basically everything gets out at this point. But it is very frustrating to me that Nick Nurse, who, by the way, did the right thing when kind of stepping to the media and talking about how he's not going to speak about what was said behind the scenes, well, that went away very quickly, and I think he probably went directly to the mouths of Shams Charania here. Now, walk with me for how I got here. For starters, whenever there's a leak, I like to put on the hat of who does this benefit? To use another Sixers example, we remember when the James Harden Rockets news came out, it was very clear that was coming from James Harden's camp that he's trying to drive his price up. He's trying to make himself seem like there's a bigger market out there than this is the case. In this case, this is pretty much an article that makes everyone look bad. It certainly makes Joel Embiid look bad. You can probably squint and say it makes Tyrese Maxey look okay as he's stepping up as a leader, but obviously that isn't like a sticking point that you want to be a reputational thing of him calling out the superstar here. So it's kind of a mudslinging article. I think Nick Nurse is the number one guy that is CYA mode of covering his own ass and making sure that this doesn't fall on him. And now, in fairness to him, he absolutely has been dealt a raw hand here, that it is tough when your biggest stars are in and out of the lineup on an every night basis. You've yet to see the top three players on the team share the floor together in an actual game setting. I get the frustrations here, but I do think that this came from Nurse's mouth. Thoughts there, Ryan?
I could definitely see that. We're kind of talking off air, like what other potential players could it be? I kind of pointed to in the article when they refer to Joel Embiid as big fella. I feel like that's a name that not around the league many people call him. I feel like that's something that someone who's comfortable with him, that has been with him for multiple years. We've heard Tyrese Maxey on the record
Yeah.
call him that before. Other guys that just popped in my head that have been with him and on the Sixers for a few years, Andre Drummond, Kelly Oubre, guys like that have been around him for a little bit more. Like I don't think Paul George is usually referring to him as that. But one name that we haven't even seen really in the media at all, talk at all, is Daryl Morey as
Yeah.
well. It's like, is Daryl Morey just throwing the coach under the bus, throwing some players under the bus? Like, he built this team, he built this roster, but we haven't seen him out in the public and speaking on any of this matters yet. So is he kind of, covering his own ass? It's like, I built it, but they haven't been healthy, and it doesn't seem like the coaches are getting through to these players as well. Could we need a change there? Maybe just kind of, as you said, a little CYA for himself, but it's disgusting for this to be where you're at
Yep.
13 games of the season. That I think coming into this season was the most hope and the most optimism that most Sixers fans had going into it, that this really is the team that can make that championship run.
100% there. And I do think Morey's an interesting talking point here. I do want to point out that the Twitter detectives have been on to the elephant in the room phrasing, which is a common term that has been thrown out by Nick Nurse throughout his career. And that was also included that the exact quote you're also referring to. Tyrese loves the big fella, but this is the elephant in the room. A person involved in the meeting told ESPN. So pretty broad on who that could possibly be. But I do think this was Nick Nurse kind of putting this out on the table here. And overall, I don't really care that you can air this out if this is what you want to do. I just need to see better. I need to see more concrete lineups. I need to see some sort of offense being run, not just this Jared McCain figure it out. And I can't believe we're even at that stage of talking about it. But the reality is this team is 2-11, that they have to find a way to scrap out of it. And just looking at the standings as a whole, that is ugly stuff to be tied with the Washington Wizards here. So I know we've kind of mentioned this in the previous video, but this to me is the clear-cut breaking point of the season. This is either they begin to turn things around from here, or we are just looking down the barrel of really one of the most disappointing Sixers seasons in history. That I do think, for the same reasons that you mentioned, with the hype that came into the season, with the new players that were added, the real deal championship aspirations, this should be the year, and none of it is going right so far. So last question here. What's your level of optimism that we begin to see that turnaround? And are you with me that Nurse deserves more blame than he's getting?
So over your next 5 games, you're playing at the Grizzlies. Then you have a 3-game homestand with the Nets versus the Clippers versus the Rockets and at Detroit. You have No back-to-backs over that stretch as well. So
Love it.
Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, all four of those. It's funny now how we're looping Jared McCain into this, but
Learned it.
all four of those guys should be playing. Anything less than 3-1 in that stretch, you fall to, just say you go 2-3 during that, or over that 5-game stretch. Just say you go 2-3,
Can't happen.
you fall to 4-14 on the year. I think that's where the real panic and desperation will really set in for me. Because if you're not able to win 4 out of 5 or at least 3 out of 5 over these next 5 games, there's got to be some real panic within the entire locker room, and I think you could see really see things start to blow up and more closed door meetings and people start pointing fingers at each other in that circumstance.
Yeah, it's got to start now, and the only way that happens is by winning games. So we'll see what happens from here. It's obviously a great thing that they don't have the back-to-backs for, obviously, with Joel Embiid being on the floor and being able to work himself into shape, but the change has to happen in the short term. So this is becoming an anti-Nick Nurse channel at a way more rapid rate than I would like to be the case. There's obviously blame to be handed out to every single member of the organization, so certainly not exclusively on him, but the turnaround needs to happen now. So let us know what you guys think in the comments. Are you with them? Are you with me on the Nick Nurse hate here and believe that he deserves a little more, I guess, blame than has been the case so far? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Dropping a like on this video. I'll be back talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.